I'd like to welcome everybody. My name is Darshan Devakaran. I'm just kidding. For those of you who know Darshan, I'm very light skinned compared to Darshan, and well, I may or may not have an accent compared to Darshan, depending on where you're viewing from today. But my name is Riley Beeman. I'm the Vice President of AUVSI North Carolina. I'm also the director of the I'm the director of the North Carolina Public Safety Drone Academy through the North Carolina Community College system. So today we're going to be talking about drones or advancing scientific research and saving lives. And we've got two great presenters today. They have a wealth of knowledge, and we'll get into introducing them and starting that shortly. But those who are joining us or continue to join us every month and who may be new this month, we generally welcome everyone. We talk about what's going on new in North Carolina and with our state chapter. And then we have a famous person with us, as always, Miriam McNabb with Drone Life, and she gives us a breakdown of kind of what's new in the news of UAS and what's going on in the world of drones from her standpoint. And a lot of information and a lot of news every month for us to talk about as far as North Carolina and then overall, what's going on overall in the big picture. So as far as our North Carolina chapter, again, we're starting off this year with our speaker series, Let's Talk Drones. We've got some great topics that are coming up. As talked about last month, we are working with a program to get drones into the hands of special needs students and adults. That is an initiative that we're looking at here in North Carolina. We're talking to some different groups now about how we can partner with those groups to work with those special interest populations and those children and young adults and adults in general with disabilities, and how drones may help their motor skills and different things, and just bring some joy and happiness to those individuals. So again, if you're interested in that, you can contact us. We are working with some different groups again. We'll be giving out more information as that goes. Darshan will be joining us a little later today. He is in a meeting right now and it's running a little over, but he will be joining us shortly. And of course, he will definitely give a briefing of what's going on with the state and our chapter. But right now, I will turn it over to Ms. McNabb for any new topics or information.
Well, thank you very much, Riley. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Miriam McNabb. I'm the editor of DroneLife.com, which is a commercial news site focused on the commercial drone industry. So welcome, everybody. Generally, I do a few overarching news themes, but this month, actually, Darshan and I decided that we would change it up a little. We will let our first speaker, Narcisa Precope. Did I say that? I said it totally wrong, didn't I? I apologize.
No, it's fine.
Who is talking about drones in the scientific arena doing university research. And there were a couple of stories that came across my desk this month about drones in scientific research. So we thought we'd let her go first and then talk about how some of the other news stories, some new applications in climate change and new technology have come about, and how those could actually help achieve more in the field. So I guess back to you, Riley, or over to Narcisa.
Sure. Thank you, Miriam. Again, just like Miriam was saying, we were very, very pleased today to have Dr. Narcisa Precope. And I know that we keep butchering her name, especially here in North Carolina. We will butcher her name always. That's why I would just always call her doctor and let her go from there. But with that being said, we are very happy to have her today. She is an expert in geospatial modeling, remote sensing, and photogrammetry. The list goes on and on of her accolades, but founder and CEO of GeoNXS Solutions, LLC. She is the director of UNCW Geospatial Services Group, the program director for United States Geospatial Intelligence Foundation, and also associate professor. So coming from the community college background and working with him with the university setting, and as far as what's going on as UAS in the university system. So without further ado, I will turn it over to you, Dr. Precope.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. And for butchering my name, I will be speaking with an accent today, brought to you straight from Romania. So thank you so much for having me, and welcome to everybody. What a way to spend the Friday afternoon, right? But so I'll try to be quick and stick to my time. And I'll speak a little bit about teaching and research using drone technology at UNCW, which is where I've been for the last almost 8 years now. And before I get started, I do want to say that a lot of the maps and of the products that you'll be seeing today are basically a collaboration with a lot of generations of undergraduate and graduate students, and they are too many to name, but most of them have gone on to be in industry, graduate school, so they were all amazing and they all contributed. So as you mentioned, part of what I do at UNCW in my lab, which really doesn't matter what it's called, but I do research on climate change within the realm of what we call land system science. So I'm very interested in understanding how people and the environment affect one another. So I look at people population vulnerability to flooding or droughts or things like that. As well as a little bit on water resources management. And more recently, given that my specialty is in the geospatial sciences focused on remote sensing, I began integrating drones into this research in ways that I'll talk a little bit in all of my slides. So as part of what I've managed to acquire at the UNCW since 2017, when I was fortunate enough to use university funding to purchase an EB, the EB Plus, not the fancy new one, just the old one, I still use it. I've been able to do a lot of, like I said, different research projects. So now, aside from that fixed wing drone, we have a 3600 Pro, a bunch of DJI Mavics and Phantoms and things like that. And a lot of the research I'll be showing today and talking about that's been integrated in teaching as well has relied on basically RGB collection, multispectral collections, thermal collections, and more recently, LiDAR data collection. So I'll be given, like I said, just a little overview of what we've been able to do. This photo down here to your right is my very first flight with the EB. We declined the training from SenseFly because I just didn't have the money. So we just went out there and learned ourselves. And this is a former graduate student who now works for Firmatech. So I'll start off with a few photos because that is the most exciting way to look at things, that from field work and from teaching a graduate and undergraduate aerial drone applications in geosciences course. I've also taught that class as a 3-day workshop to folks in industry or government, and it's been very successful, like I said, over time. So just a few photos. All of the work I do includes students. So as you'll see from all of these photos, we go out in the field quite a lot. And aside from teaching students how to use drones, and then how to process the data, how to design the missions, how to think about all the things that can go wrong, we collect a lot of ground control points, a lot of field data, using real-time kinematics GPSs and things like that. And fieldwork has spanned geographic areas, focused primarily on North Carolina, various islands around the state, various Nature Conservancy and other lands, as well as Africa. So these are photos from a project funded by the National Science Foundation in Africa, as well as Peru even, where I've gone and done training, teaching and research as well. So like I said, a lot of variability, a lot of students over time, a lot of excitement, class and then entire classes of students that get to learn not only about drones and a little bit on the regulations and safety, but primarily, and my emphasis is always on teaching them the end-to-end, from mission design to implementation, collection, and data processing on the back end. So So to kind of give you an idea of the kinds of projects that all of these students have worked on through their undergraduate and graduate studies, as well as things that have been funded externally in my lab. Here's a first example, an earlier application that we did in collaboration with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers here at the Wilmington office. They were interested in seeing whether we can use a drone to basically survey Eagle Island. This is a local feature of interest where all the dredge material that comes from the Cape Fear River gets deposited. So we flew in about an hour and 40 minutes, what would have taken a couple days for folks to survey on foot and try to look at the DSMs and the resulting ortho images to identify potential seepage areas that can be then checked by a field team. So the whole, the overarching premise with my focus on incorporating drone technology into geospatial sciences and into remote sensing research applications has always been the idea that we can cover more ground in the field and we can essentially more effectively tie processes that occur on a very small, on a very minute spatial scale to the kinds of processes we can measure and quantify and observe with satellite imagery, for example, which has been the focus of a lot of remote sensing prior to this. So throughout all of these examples, even though I'm only showing you the cool drone imagery that we collected, the focus is usually to tie this imagery to the next product or to satellite imagery or to try to apply those findings on a larger scale. And then we did applications. So I'll just, again, give some examples of various types of applications for folks that may not have done a lot of research of what's interesting to us, and a lot of times this is driven by students. So this is an example of a group of excited students wanting to go out and see if they could use a thermal camera to pinpoint birds on this property, Lee Lake. And it turns out that we learned quickly in the hard way that their feathers insulate them from having essentially a thermal signature, so they can pop up very nicely, as you can see over here, all these white dots in RGB imagery, but they weren't also visible like we had expected in a thermal imagery. But then we ended up going ahead and collaborating with folks in biology to look at nesting, shorebird nesting success. So we did a summer-long set of repeat imagery collection on Lee Hutaff Island to essentially try to quantify a thermal landscape and be able to say, okay, does the temperature of the superficial temperature of the sand influence the nesting success of these birds? So that was a cool application, and that became a master's thesis that was completed in biology and publications and things like that. And we were also able, well, the biologists were able to show that there was indeed a relationship between the temperature of the sand and what birds preferred to maintain their nests in, and it was really an in-between, not too cold and not too hot, but it was cool to be able to show that with data. And then we can use things like thermal imagery, and here I do have to thank SenseFly for essentially loaning me indefinitely, basically, one of their thermal sensors, the thermal map sensor, for a while now. So if anybody from SenseFly is on here, thank you again. So with these thermal cameras, we can look at all sorts of questions. One of the most obvious one being to look maybe at heat signatures and urban heat island effect. So this is just an example of a data set from Brunswick County. Let's see, what else do we have? Then another really cool set of applications where drones come in handy is to look at geomorphological applications. So applications that help us understand and begin to quantify coastal erosion, for example, or sediment transport, or how the lack or changes in vegetation are affecting shoreline movements or any other coastal processes. So these are two images that were collected on Masonboro Island that low tide and high tide respectively, using an RGB camera. Since then, we've gone back. So these images here again show you the low tide, high tide, and what can be resolved from that imagery in terms of those digital surface models and the digital terrain models that we can obtain. And what we very quickly discovered, though, with doing this kind of research in coastal regions, is that we need a little bit better definition in terms of that topographic variation than simple RGB cameras and photochromatic algorithms allow us to do so. So now we're doing this kind of work using LiDAR sensors. So I'll talk about that in just a second. Another cool application that one of my grad students has worked on in collaboration with a colleague of mine who's a geologist is to look at living shorelines. And as we all know, North Carolina has a pretty large problem that kind of goes along with coastal erosion. And we try to implement these nature-based solutions, living shorelines being one of them. So we can use, again, fairly simple, this is just RGB data, to look at how these living shorelines, these oyster beds, are actually trapping or speeding up the amount of sediment that gets eroded. So by essentially just doing a quick few flights and processing this data, we were able to show that there's a heightened loss of sediment in the spaces between these living shorelines. So that can lead to a change in how these are installed. And then sort of similarly, we can start looking at things that pertain to vegetation, and the majority of my research is on the remote sensing of vegetation. And these are examples from one of my almost graduated master's students, Britton Baxley's thesis, where we were working with the Army Corps again to look at the spread of Phragmites australis, which is a highly invasive reed that affects a lot of coastal ecosystems, not only in North Carolina, but all across the coast. So here we are using multispectral imagery to tap to remote sensing and look at these processes of invasive species. Which brings me to one of the last projects that I wanted to talk about, and this is a project funded by the North Carolina Department of Transportation that started in August 2019, that allowed me to purchase a LiDAR system that we use here at the university. And the idea here is to fuse multi-source UAS-derived data, such as LiDAR data, multispectral data, RGB data, and thermal data, to basically improve the wetlands prediction model that the DOT uses to identify good candidate locations for road expansion for various types of projects. So I'll show you a few visuals. I'm excited about this sensor. It was a really cool addition. We only got this less than a year ago, and we've been able to survey a lot of different sites and essentially get a level of data that we hadn't been able to get before with just photogrammetry. So here's an example, and I selected a specific example from that we flew by a place called Maysville Elementary up near New Bern, and I'll show you in just a second why I selected this place to show you. So just a few visuals of the level of data accuracy. So these data sets that I'm showing you here are basically LiDAR, UAS-borne LiDAR-derived clouds that are colorized by elevation. Blue shades indicating low elevation, redder shades higher elevation. The average vertical accuracy on these data sets, and I use a Quanergy LiDAR system for these, is between 4 and 5 centimeters. So pretty good accuracy. You can essentially think of a wealth of applications for a data set of this nature. So again, the colors indicate elevation, height of the vegetation. So you can kind of pick out here the river. And again, the focus of the project is to look at wetlands and to improve how wetlands are classified for better mitigation and conservation purposes. And we can even pick up power lines, all sorts of things. And one of the things that I'm almost out of time here, I know, but in the process of flying these LiDAR data sets, so we don't always only fly the LiDAR, we're also flying multispectral and thermal, and then we go out in the field and we collect GCPs on almost every flight line if we can place them. And then with these GCPs, we then process these point clouds to obtain generally, like I said, between 7 and 4 centimeter vertical accuracy, which is really pretty good. Oops, and this was supposed to, oh no. Well, I also had a photo here that was showing you that we're also collecting multispectral data as well as thermal data. So here is the school. So we did this work with permission from this school. We were basically placed right here. We flew, but before we flew, we showed and talked about drones to a group of over 45 basic elementary and kindergarten kids, and they were so excited. And I took off with the drone, and they were just very excited about not only the drones, but we try to take the time and explain that this is mapping and this is geospatial science, and there's a bright future in that. So this gives me a lot of hope to see so many kids that were so interested, to kind of bring it all back together. So it's research, but at every step of the way, we try to engage with kids with the next generation of geospatial scientists and drone scientists, and that's the most exciting component of it all. So that's all I had. Thank you so much for listening, and let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Percote. That is great information, and I know that I think we're going to go over to Miriam for a few ideas and points that we're going to talk about.
Okay.
If I can get myself unmuted. Thank you so much, Dr. Percote. That was absolutely fascinating. There was, the images are kind of like art, and when you can see every single tree, it's absolutely still amazing to me. So every month I kind of put together a few stories. This month, Darshan and I thought that we would kind of orient the stories around the speakers and kind of get the discussion going that way. So there were a couple stories that came across my desk this month around kind of scientific research. One of them being drones for science. Long-range fixed-wing UAVs are a new tool in understanding climate change. And the deal on that was that they were using long-range fixed wings that could fly sort of right over the surface of the water to collect climate change data that they couldn't get with manned aircraft, because manned aircraft can't fly so low. So it kind of is a new way of gathering data that was extremely difficult to acquire before. And when Darshan and I were talking about this, we were thinking that, what's really interesting is the ability to kind of think about ways that industry and researchers can work together. So you mentioned, that you've worked with EB. The EB is, of course, a world-class drone fixed wing, and for them to sort of loan you the LiDAR equipment is amazing, and for you to be able to bring that out to kids in the field at the elementary school level. So you've got, graduate students, scientists writing research papers, and you're also exposing elementary school kids to this work. Sort of on your wish list of things that could help. If it's a long list, that's great. I'm sure we have industry people here. Come on, listen up. Like, what would be on your wish list for the ultimate research tool? And it's hard because researchers so often have to rely upon kind of donations and partnering with industry, because they don't have unlimited funds to go out and purchase a $100,000 payload. But
right. So yeah, so that's a great question. And just a point of clarification, SenseLight lent me the thermal map sensor to go on the drone they sold me.
Okay.
The LiDAR was a much more expensive piece that I purchased with DOT funds.
I see, okay.
So if I was to have, my wish list would be, to get the EB SenseFlight EBX donated to us. No, I'm just kidding.
No, that would be cool.
That would be cool, and I've been trying. No, two sense flies, they have been amazing, I will say, and they are a major player in, I feel like, a lot of the developments in drone technology in North Carolina. I was actually slated to go to Namibia for a Fulbright, and they were going to loan me an ABX for the duration of my stay there, which was 5 months. So they are absolutely fantastic. But I think on my wish list would be a VTOL drone where I wouldn't be limited so much by takeoff and landing as I am with a fixed wing. I really like flying the fixed wing or the longer endurance drones for the ability to collect, obviously, data over a larger area. But for me, it's all about the sensors that are on there, not so much the drone itself. I would love to have a multispectral or a hyperspectral sensor that allows us to go a little bit outside of the limited 4 bands sensor that I have right now, and things like that. Of course, having a topobathymetric LiDAR would be absolutely amazing. Yeah, so I have lots of things on my wish list.
That's great.
So I think that those combined, essentially, especially, again, depending on the applications, I'm sure we'll hear from Steve in just a minute, and he's going to have very different needs. Our needs from an environmental research perspective are very much about measuring processes and things where we do like to go into different parts of the electromagnetic spectrum.
And presumably there are a lot of commercial applications
Absolutely
that are the same. So it's really,
yes.
because it's such a wide variety of the applications that you're able to achieve.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I was trying to do with my talk, just give a little flavor of this, that, and the other thing. But again, it's limited from the perspective of what I do have available.
Mm-hmm. So the other thing, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, sorry, no, you go ahead.
Hi, Darshan.
Yeah.
The other topic that came to mind when we were looking at news stories sort of related was this month there were quite a few announcements of people receiving BVLOS waivers. And so we were interested to hear kind of how you felt that allowed to fly beyond visual line of sight. How would that affect the research that you're able to do?
I think that would significantly speed up our data collection in the field, and having to constantly be thinking about, okay, if I want to cover this much area, then I have to place a person over there, and I have to place a person with a radio on the other side. So it would be very helpful for us, because again, we don't really do, as you notice, most of my data is not from densely populated areas, right? So a lot of that. So we wouldn't be so much worried about safety of individuals, because we are already careful and worried about that in the first place. But yes, it would allow us to collect more data faster. So that would all be very nice.
So Miriam, related to the same question also to Narcissa, the same question, but slightly different way. What I'm trying to understand is how has FAA been or how has FAA been helpful for universities to get waivers and authorizations easier in the name of research, or is it the same struggle which everyone has to go through? Do universities get any benefit?
In my experience, it's the same. I don't think there's any exception being made by the FAA for research purposes.
Okay, and does FAA provide guidance for universities in some way on how they could, get their processes handled sooner? Because when it comes to research, when you get a research grant or something, you already have a focus, an area of focus there. So does that help, get waivers? Have you tried in the past getting waivers?
I have not tried. In the beginning, you know how we used to have 6 COAs in North Carolina back in 2017, for example. We could have gone and flown in these 6 locations. Now that's changed. I have not honestly tried to get a waiver, because I've tried to kind of not be hung up on the process of applying, but I should. I haven't really done it much.
because they have started working with public safety agencies, getting them, little bit more benefits than before. So I think it's high time to even think about, as FAA started, focus on funding universities, and I think it's some sort of a discussion, maybe from us or maybe from a bunch of universities, or even with NC State University, to drive some sort of a connection. Because when it comes to research, unless the research is done and you get the data, and that data is always helpful to FAA, it is always a good thing to create some sort of a agreement wherein FAA says that, okay, the research that you're doing, the data comes to us, and this helps us, make it easier for others.
Right.
So, that's just my take on this.
That's a great idea, but I'll just say though that with this DOT project, for example, that we're funded under, there's an entire whole other level of restrictions that we have that are imposed by the DOT themselves. So I don't know that it would help much to,
Okay. And a question also, I think it was the question before this, but more towards manufacturers. How does manufacturers, working with manufacturers, is it been easy for you in the university? Have you been able to, give them some sort of guidance on some of the stuff that you would prefer seeing in the future? Because remote sensing, photogrammetry, that's all different from just flying a drone and taking pictures. How has that been? Has there been any sort of conversation where manufacturers are ready to give you technology to test out?
yes. Yeah, so in addition to the relationship with SenseFly and the ability to test out any of their equipment, I've had a good relationship with Mica Sense as well, and they make a lot of really awesome multi-spec. They've actually let me, again, in the same way, loan out sensors for a duration of time for free, basically, and we just basically in return gave them data. So they are very open to doing that.
Nice. That's good to see that one. And that's exactly the type of model I'm saying that maybe FAA should also look into, because the data that comes out from universities is very useful in making decisions. So it's like when universities and industries collaborate.
Yes.
That's where the success for the industry overall is. That's how the industry is going to move. Very interesting.
This is hey Darshan, this is Wes from FlyTreks. How's it going?
Good, man. How are you?
Good. Hey, I think a more mature conversation about, instead of talking about waivers, is how do you entice OEMs like Parrot and SenseFly to go through the type certification process so you can avoid. I know you fly in less dense, and most likely there's no populations where you're flying, but there is that rule that just came out. So it's how do you, as a public entity or an institution that's doing research, show the value to these OEMs to actually go through the type certification process. I think there's about 10 OEMs right now, and the majority of them for package delivery, but there is value with these other platforms to go through the process, because if you can get a blanket authorization for ops over people for multiple purposes for certain population densities, then you can just not worry about.
True. Very true. And I think that's
I say, Darshan, it's Paul, and you mentioned in the type certification there is at least one, the Wingcopter, I believe, that is a platform that is under type certification for as a mapping platform.
Yeah, there you go. So at least one, yeah. So that would be good. So you can, Department of Transportation projects obviously would have a huge use in that type of a platform, and you can see kind of whoever is first, you'll probably see a spike of purchases on that platform, because you can just get the paperwork and submit that to the FAA and not have to worry about the ops over people issues.
True. No, and so Wes, I think to better understand this would be how is FAA working with OEMs? Are they expecting OEMs to work with third parties or universities or anything?
Not for the type certification process, just because it's handled by the Aircraft Certification Office and the Aircraft Evaluation Division. So those OEMs would have to submit, an application to join the aircraft certification process, and then clearly define the ops in which their platform can operate. So using these types of use cases are good to help them determine and define what those are, because they'll be limited based upon the capabilities of the aircraft over the specified population density. So, it'd be in the commercial industry's best interest to find the users, the ones that would benefit from this the greatest, and say, hey, how do you use this platform operationally, so we can, when we talk about the use case and we talk about the ConOps that we're going to get approved by the FAA, help us define those. And I see like that would be a good starting point, is working with them and finding ways to help offset those costs of that process, because it's been a 3-year process for us, for example. So heavy lift.
No, I think you bring up a very good point in that, and I think if there are any OEMs on this session, it'll be useful for them to know this. But at the same time, I think it's a good conversation to start with the OEMs and start connecting. Universities and already Department of Transportation that are not involved with various use cases, and then start the conversation, because I think end of the day or end of the line, aircrafts will have to we are going to be hopefully seeing aircrafts that are actually going to be used for operations, all type certified in some way, or meeting some sort of guidelines when they're in manufacturing guidelines and stuff, which is not yet there for all aircrafts. So when that happens, I think this is the path forward for that, or getting to that point.
Yeah, and just another food for thought. They really quickly defined the requirements for package delivery, because there were so many going after it, and if they have another payload company with Wingcopter going through, I'm sure they've defined it. But just to put things in perspective, they don't even have an entity, a designated responsible person who can actually sign off on drones as certified yet. So not only are the processes not defined, they don't really have anyone that's quote unquote certified to sign these off once they do go through the processes. So it's kind of a chicken and the egg thing right now in the industry. So.
And I think you hit the right thing. It's the need that is in the last 1 year, especially with COVID and everything, the need has been more. So the focus has been more. But when you think about drones that are used for mapping, photogrammetry, and all these purposes, it's been there for quite some time, but there hasn't been enough voice heard. FAA has not heard enough need from maybe from the OEMs, maybe from the industry, maybe from even the universities, to change certain rules also, to the point even getting them type certified and everything. That's an interesting point. Miriam, any other things on your news?
That's what I had on scientific research was fixed wings for climate change and BVLOS, and then I have a few more after we hear about public safety.
Sure. Before we just get into person, I read one thing just yesterday. I don't know if anyone wants to talk about it, but it says UAV simulator market size to reach 2,277 million by 2027. They said the simulator market for UAVs is going to be booming by 2027. Any thoughts on that?
Is that simulators for flight simulators, or is that simulators for the aircraft to see how it performs in specific conditions?
So it says, according to the new report published by Fortune Business Insight, the global UAV simulator market is projected to reach that, and by 2027. And they're giving examples. The deployment of drones to combat COVID-19 pandemic has brightened the prospects of this market. And they talked about Matanet, Swissport for drone delivery and everything. They talk about Alphabet company and all, but they are listed the top companies in the world that are going to have a big business very soon. And from US, we have General Atomics, Aeronautical Systems, and Northrop Grumman Corporation, rest are all international. So I don't know, is this going to be for commercial drones? Is this looking towards more, but it looks like with drone delivery and all they're mentioning, this is more in the commercial space. So I don't know, I know the UAV simulator, basically simulators existed. Initially, the simulators were pretty bad simulators. We had real bad quality, or it was not focused on the type of missions that we were actually doing. And then you had the simulator companies, building simulators more close to what operations you're doing. But how much of this is going to impact? Is it going to be an integral part of training in some way? Or something? Because I was surprised when I saw the US mention about the simulator market growing. I know the drone industry overall, on the manufacturing side, a lot of new players are come, but simulator is a pretty interesting. If anyone has any thoughts on that? Anything they heard about? Maybe just a food for thought, think about it, and maybe the next time we can discuss.
Yeah, I mean,
more on that
this is Wes again. Most of the simulators I've seen is just, stick control and mission planning and stuff like that. But the integration of the actual payloads, that would make sense to the commercial market. They're not really there yet. I think if they're mentioning Northrop Grumman and General Atomics, first of all, L3 manufactures their simulator. I know Northrop does have their simulator for their Global Hawk, but yeah, I know I've experienced a pretty good simulator for UAVs at UND, but I'm not really sure where it's going to go for the commercial side.
Interesting. I know in the urban air mobility side, a lot of companies have started looking into the simulator, approach of training the pilots or testing. So it'll be interesting to see what Bruce said would make sense to the public safety market. Absolutely. Especially a training on various platforms to the point of various environments. I think, yes, integrating simulator in some way, but that's the thing, we haven't really seen enough of good simulators out there, and the ones which we are there, is limited to certain platforms only. So it'll be interesting to see how the simulator market grows, but I think eventually there may be an interest, especially in the training side. But because we don't have in a Part 107, under Part 107, a training requirement, that is where
that's exactly what I was thinking, Darshan, is when I'm thinking manned aviation, you have specific simulators that are actually looked at in a way where you can log and do specific type training in this simulator because it might have some sort of spatial movement, as opposed to just a screen and like a controller. So with the future of maybe having time requirements for specific types of operations, even looking at Part 135, right, drone delivery operations, some sort of simulator could benefit pilots greatly.
And so this is to Wes and Paul. Right now, like Flightrex, has they shown any, and Causey and all have shown any interest towards simulators or working with anyone, or with any universities or anything on that?
Yeah, so in the Part 135 and Part 121 operations and the rules and regs for manned aviation, there is the ability for you to include simulator training in your training program, but it's not a requirement. It just is a training multiplier. But when you build an intelligent GCS, most of it can be, simulated. So in a way, they're already pre-built as a simulator on that individual system. But I don't think right now it's mature enough to say, okay, there's a third party that wants to build a simulator for your GCS and also include, some sort of mapping in that simulator as well. It's really a case by case.
Sure, makes sense. I know that NC A&T University has got I think it's a simulator, or if I'm mistaken, but they can take any scenario and the environment and recreate it I know Dr. Ali is involved in it. When I'd gone down for a visit, I'd seen it, but in the recent last 1-2 years, I've not heard much about it. So I know that there's some sort of, I know even MITRE, when I was talking to MITRE, they said they have a simulation, not a simulation of a traffic management system that you can actually integrate your drones into and test it out, and then different scenarios. So there's different on training site simulator and then the simulation. So maybe that's different stuff. But MITRE, I remember, had some discussions on that they wanted more testing to be done in a simulation environment. So two different things, but yeah.
Is anybody interested in doing nighttime operations in a simulated environment before they get out and do it in a real environment? For anybody that is less experienced in nighttime operations?
No, good point on that one, because I think night training simulator would really benefit because you can really test various scenarios, and that could really be useful.
And I think the experience is way down in drones because nighttime has not been operated very largely. I think unless you've been doing it rogue, I don't think that drones have been largely used in nighttime operations because it's not been allowed. So I just think that there's a lot of people that haven't been operating at night. So I just think it's a less utilized way that drones have been used. So there's a lot of people that have been pretty naive at operating at night. And so, just kind of looking through a camera, looking down, what is staring back at you but a bunch of lights? And now you have to figure out where you are, what's looking back at you, what's blinking at you, and kind of figuring out where you are and all of that. I think that's just a really great use of drone simulation. If you haven't thought about it, it's a three-dimensional world, but that changes radically at night. It becomes very strange. It becomes very black and white. And if you haven't really thought about it, it's just a really great use of simulation. And if you don't know a lot about the simulator world, where simulation first started, it started out at night. So manned aviation simulation started out in nighttime mode only, and that's how pilots first learned to fly, was at night. And so it's really kind of bizarre that drone simulation would start out in kind of a daylight environment, and that we might use it to its best advantage in teaching drone pilots how to fly at night, and teach them how to kind of navigate a nighttime environment. But pilots first learned to fly at simulation at night, and kind of figure out their spatial orientation and all that at night. But excuse me. I think it'd just be a really great use of spatial orientation, right side up, where are you? Where are those blinking lights coming from? Am I over water? Am I right side up and all that? So if you haven't thought about it, I think nighttime operations would be a great use of it.
And I think
there's a training aid that really helps in nighttime operations that I use with public safety students because you can train them during the day. If you use instrument in the airplane, if you're going for an instrument rating, you have to wear foggles. You can only see right below you. And I find a lot of success using those foggles with drone pilots during the day to help them become familiar with exactly what their controllers are telling them. And you don't have to take them out at night to start with.
And also, Ms. Birdsong is right. I'll be introducing Steve here in just a few minutes, but one thing that we found in our public safety classes, and we merged with DOT and we merged with the state, was full scenario-based training at nighttime, and giving those pilots that nighttime experience. Because what we found is when we went across the U.S., everybody had a different view of what they thought that training would look like. If you go to Las Vegas, and I am not knocking anyone or any instructors in any set whatsoever, but if you're going to run a nighttime public safety operation, you're not going to have big neon columns surrounding a field with Christmas lights marking the body and a spotlight specifically focused on that body. That is not a true scenario. That is not what's going to happen when you come out of the gate and get into the air. And just like Ms. Birdsong is saying, with Steve, Darshan, and I, and several other pilots with the state, we took these guys out into large, empty, vast fields with cornfields and pine trees and things like that, and said, this is exactly what's going to happen. And we give them that experience. And if you have not flown at night and you are in the public safety world, or you're even in the university setting, or you're going to be in any area or form to where you're going to fly at night, you have got to experience what that's like in real life, because it is a game changer. You're going to have different things affect you that will not happen during the day. So we spent a lot of time, like Ms. Birdsong was saying, going around the state, offering that specific class, and we've got a lot of positive feedback from it. We're not saying we're the only game in town. I'm just telling you, if you're going to be flying at night, please start training now and get some experience.
And I would even hazard to say after rain, when it's reflective, anything that reflects. So I mentioned over water and anything reflective. I would even say as streets become reflective after a rain, anything that reflects. It's very strange looking down on that through a camera when that's what when those become your eyes. Anything that reflects like that, it really throws you into where you are and what am I looking at and what becomes my focal. So those are the kinds of things that you really have to consider when you're talking about night operations, and all of that just becomes very daunting and very overwhelming. Again, we're talking about new pilots, new operations, and once they get over that, and once they get those gotchas out of the way, get that experience, it's a different story. But those are the kinds of things that I think that simulation becomes immensely valuable for. Get all of that out of the way, and they become much more experienced and much better at it. So
what's kind of interesting though is simulating nighttime operations for something Narcisa might be doing with a fixed wing drone could be, compared to having a remote in your hand where you're using the sticks to take off and kind of like pilot and move a drone, might look a little bit differently based on the system that is being used to like pilot that aircraft.
And just to mention, like, which I'm not against Steve's time, but Steve is going to be talking about his night training, syllabus and all that he's creating right now. But one of the things that a good thing Riley pointed out, and Jennifer, thanks for bringing up the point about night training and simulation, everything. But the reality is that when say you're a public safety agency, you pull up to a location, there is you have to get down and dirty. Basically, you need to take the drone out of aircraft, from your vehicle. You have to set it up, or you have to set the location. There's a lot of planning to be done. Now, when you go for training with some of the folks who give you a perfect environment, they set up the lights early on, they set up everything, they put all the stuff in its right place, then then get you into a training mode. That's different, because that is not the perfect world. That is not the real world. That is a training world. Yes, it's fun. It's good for training purposes. But the reality is you may be taking off your drone and your memory card falls down and you're lost for the night because you forgot to bring any other memory card. And that was your one memory card that you have. And now you don't have a memory card and you're trying to take pictures. You're done with the operation. So that's the reality. And that's the type of training that needs to be done. Now, that's just setting up operation. But in the night, a lot of things happen. As a manned aviator, we have certain preparations to be done before we get to flights. We can't just get down from the car, go and sit in the aircraft and take off. No, we have to prepare. The light condition, the human factors play an important role. And we may think that during the day, we may be the best pilots, we may be able to fly everything, but in the night, things change. You may see aircrafts which are not aircrafts. You may see stars which are not stars. These things have happened and continue happening. And as we are maturing in this industry, there's no doubt that nighttime flying is going to be more integral. Yes, 3 years back when night flying was discussed, a lot of people wanted night flying, but actually did not do anything with night flying. They went and got the waiver, but a lot of departments didn't even use it. Now, you're going to be using it in the future, and you need to be prepared for that. So maybe simulating it, training with simulators, talking to your OEMs to see what other options are there. That's the discussion we are doing. I know in drone delivery, maybe right now, not doing night flights, but when the flights are automated, I don't think so. day or night matters. So, there's going to be a lot of night flying going on. So that's what I just wanted to bring that point up. But Riley, you can take it, go ahead with the next part.
Sure. As we move over from scientific research, and again, we're going to go into saving lives. Our next presenter, I am biased. I will go ahead and share that out of the gate. He's not just a friend and an advisor. He has been my first chief pilot I ever hired for the Academy. He has been with me since we started the Academy several years ago, and I will share why. When I first came into starting the Academy for North Carolina and knowing that our pilots for public safety needed hands-on training, not book training. Yes, they needed their Part 107. You've all heard me say it. Part 107 is your license to learn. They needed skills training, and there was nothing set for that. And I thought that in the community college system, we could build this academy to where our public safety entities and employees and members could get classes for free through the community college system. And so we did. With that being said, I was constantly looking for pilots, and this one name kept popping up. Talk to Steve Rode. Have you met Steve Rode yet? And I said, no, I've not met this gentleman. Somebody needs to get me in contact with him. Long story short, our paths did cross. And I will say this: in North Carolina, we can talk a lot about our built UAS history and the progress that we've made, and it's unbelievable. It truly is. In public safety, you cannot say public safety in UAS and not include Steve Rode's name. And I'm not saying that to just brag on him because he's a friend. I say that because before all these departments had drones, before they were running missions, Steve was in the air flying missions. And that is wholeheartedly the truth. Man has logged so many hours and so many mission hours, it is mind-boggling. We used to keep up with how many hours he flew a year, how many missions that he went on, how many missions we all went on, how many trainings we did, and it was way too much. What I do like about Steve is he is a wealth of knowledge. He is a manned pilot as well. He owns a plane. He flies all the time. And he will tell you that. What I like about Steve, you learn something every time you talk to him. You're going to hear the good stuff, but more importantly, you're going to hear the bad stuff. And in the world of UAS technology, we hear a lot of great PR pieces. This is what drones are doing. They're saving lives. They're doing all this great stuff. And we're not trying to be a downer, but at the same time, we all know on this call, we all know there's a lot of negative things that go into UAS. There's a lot of things, they're not always the answer. They're a great tool and a great resource. When we first started, we encountered some naysayers, some people that were, these guys think they know everything. They're too negative. And it wasn't that we knew everything. It wasn't that Steve was trying to be Mr. Know-it-all or myself or anything like that. It was the point that at the time he was flying more missions than anyone in the state. He was finding people. He was providing useful data and information to the needed people at that moment. And with that, there were growing pains. And that's some of the things that we went through. As I said, Steve is a manned pilot. He also flies for rescue dogs as a manned pilot. He is also his plane is also listed as Fire Demon 1 for the state. So he does a lot of flights for public safety, not just UAS, which he works for Wake Forest Fire Department, flying their drone and leading their team. We talk about policy and procedure. We talk about classes. We talk about getting people in the know and experience. Steve successfully wrote policy and procedure and got a major fire department here in North Carolina to put it in place when most people were learning what COAs and Part 107 were. I can't brag on him enough. He's an awesome wealth of knowledge. He has an awesome newsletter that if you're not a part of, please provide him your email address. He will put you on a newsletter. He gives out great information for both manned and unmanned pilots. So without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to our chief pilot and a dear friend, Mr. Steve Rode.
Well, there's nothing I can say to that except hold on, Riley. I still have it, my friend. So my name is Steve Rode, and my specialty is public safety. Riley mentioned the newsletter. If you're interested in public safety updates and real world information, just go to my website, PS, like public safety, flight.org, psflight.org, sign up for the newsletter. So I cannot believe how awesome everyone teed me up for what I'm going to talk about today. And I don't need to talk about drones are awesome and firefighters and police officers are awesome. Everybody's awesome. We all love each other. I wanted to talk about saving lives this week by saving pilots. So this week has been full of technical public safety visual observer questions. And now that I'm an FAA safety team member, I spend a lot of time digging for the right answers on these situations so I don't look like an idiot. And what ends up happening is I often find that the right answer to a situation is different than what a lot of us have assumed. So let's talk about what a visual observer must be able to do. It's not sufficient to be able to just see the drone in the air. Okay, this is a good refresher. The visual observer must be able to detect the following without the aid of any visual aids other than glasses. And there's an acronym for this, LAASDON. And the really nerdy aviators out there will remember this LASDON. It stands for location, altitude, attitude, speed, direction of flight, obstacle clearance, and not create a hazard to other aircraft or personnel on the ground. So when it comes to night flight, you guys don't know how much I was biting my tongue there. This has been a huge topic. And I'm in the middle right now of writing a 25 lecture giant online class for public safety. So I spent a whole day digging into this one this week. So it drives me crazy that we talk about a night waiver. Actually, it is a daytime waiver. It's 107.29 for Part 107 pilots. A 107.29 waiver for flying at night is going away very soon. And once you take your recurrent test, you will be able to fly at night without applying for a waiver. The key date, I believe, is, I wrote about it, it's either March 16th or March 18th. Don't take a recurrent test before that date because that does not include night flight authorization. So check that date. You can visit the site, search for it. So how far can you really fly at night as a PIC? This answer is going to surprise you. So the answer is really much, much shorter than you would assume. If you're flying at night, you must still meet that LASDON requirement in directly observing the aircraft. The controller telemetry is nice, but it does not satisfy the requirements of 107.31 that says that with vision that is unaided by any device other than corrective lenses, the remote pilot in command, the visual observer is one is used, and the person manipulating the flight controls must be able to see the unmanned aircraft throughout the entire flight to know the location, determine the attitude, altitude, and direction of flight, observe the airspace for other aircraft hazards, and make sure it doesn't endanger any property or people on the ground. A confusing part about night flight is we have to put these strobe lights on, and they're visible for 3 statute miles. Well, actually, if you buy a strobe light, and the manufacturer says that it can be seen for 3 miles, it is not in compliant. There is no strobe light manufactured today that technically meets the requirement. The pilot in command of the aircraft has to take that aircraft out and test that. And the way that you do that is you set up a friend that's 3 statute miles away from you, and you take off and you go straight up and you see if they can see it. Now, here's the confusing thing about night flight is that people assume if I can see the strobe lights on the drone, that means I'm flying okay. The reality is that's absolutely wrong. The strobe lights are not there for the pilot in command of the drone. The strobe lights are a requirement so that manned aircraft can see the drone. So remember that you can't fly out your visual line of sight and your ability to determine altitude, attitude, speed, direction of travel, orientation of the aircraft. So that ends up being actually less than 1,000 feet from the PIC. And it's much less depending on the darkness, the weather, and other possible factors. So in public safety, this is why that is a big deal. And it should be for everybody now. Because as the drone field ages and more people are getting into it and more drones are flying, more people are complaining about pilots. New technology such as remote ID will allow pilots to be able to be located more. And the FSDO here in our section of the country and in every section of the country just receives more and more complaints about pilots every day. In fact, for some reason, I'm on the dispatch, the 911 center. When people call in with drone problems, I get to answer those things. And it used to be, hey, I saw a drone, somebody's flying nearby. And then it kind of escalated, hey, this drone flew over my property, and now I want to sue them. And now it's up to, I want to shoot it down. So the last thing you want to do is be involved in any situation where you're flying further than your visual line of sight with a drone at night and have an incident or an accident, because these things are coming down every day, and then have to be the pilot to explain it, because you're not going to win that one. But this makes a nice transition. We talked about beyond visual line of sight. Most people call that BV loss. I call it a beyond waiver. So if I say that, beyond waiver, that's what I mean. So another issue that I've had to deal with this week with public safety agencies is that some departments have assumed that if they get a beyond waiver, that they can fly out of the pilot's line of sight as far as they want. But we need to back the bus up a bit here. So the beyond waiver is for the pilot in command, and it does not waive the continued need for a visual observer. The aircraft is beyond the line of sight of the pilot, but not out of sight. So bear with me for a second. To be able to fly without a visual observer, you need to request a waiver not for 107.31, but you must add 107.33B and C2. So a very small number of Part 107 beyond waivers include that section. That is the waiver for the need for a visual observer. Waivers without that, you have to maintain a visual observer. If that means you're flying out of line of sight, you're going to have to stage visual observers. They're going to have to be in full duplex radio communication with the pilot. Don't assume that you can fly out of line of sight. Now, public agencies, so many agencies have gone out and applied for COAs, certificates of authorization to run their own operations. And they did it because they didn't necessarily want to, well, as one department told me once, they got a COA because their pilots couldn't pass the Part 107 exam, which wasn't the best excuse. But COA agencies that might fly beyond visual line of sight are actually not waived as well for the visual observer requirement. COA agencies need to go back and read their waivers closely, and they'll find it specifically does not waive the VO requirement. So not long ago, the FAA announced the new tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver for COA agencies to fly beyond line of sight in life-threatening situations. What is happening is a fair number of COA agencies are calling in and they're asking for these waivers, but they are not life-threatening, imminent danger situations. And that is what the tactical waiver is meant for. However, even under a tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver, flight distance is limited to 1,500 feet from the pilot in command, and all tactical beyond visual line of sight waivers require a visual observer. And here's where it gets confusing, is the waiver doesn't say it requires a visual observer, but it doesn't say that it doesn't. So visual observer remains a requirement even under a tactical beyond visual line of sight waiver. So speaking of unintended public safety COA problems, here's another one that crept up this week. Most COA waivers include the following language. Airworthiness. All aircraft flying in the NAS must be airworthy. Under Part 107.15, the remote pilot in command is responsible for ensuring the UAS is airworthy. Under the public statutes, the public aircraft operator is responsible for certifying that their drone is airworthiness. An airworthiness statement will be required when a public aircraft operator applies for a COA. As we kind of talked about a few minutes ago, the whole idea of manufacturers applying for airworthiness certification is new. There are 10 manufacturers that are going for it. It'll probably be a year, 2 years before they're through that process. So the problem is that if you are flying strictly as a COA pilot, you need to know that you are already in violation of the COA, because you can't certify that the drone is airworthy even though the COA requires it. So that's a gotcha that you got to realize. So I'm always all about telling any COA pilot that might be out there flying for a public service agency, go get your Part 107 and always have that as a backup, because if your COA doesn't cover you and you don't have a Part 107, you are flying as an uncertificated pilot. That is not good if there's an accident or illness. But let me tell you about some exciting news that's come up. There's a new thing called the Airborne Optical Sectioning software, camera, etc. In the public safety world, Riley mentioned that, we have all this marketing about how great things are, but in the public safety world, one of the biggest disappointments has to be the idea that you can use a thermal camera to find missing people and perps that are fleeing and anything else. This week, a large thermal camera company finally came out and said this about thermal cameras. I love it. Finding a hiker lost in the woods is a challenging mission. If the person is lost in densely forested terrain, then sunlight is largely blocked by trees and other vegetation, and the ground reflects very little light. Because of this, thermal imaging is often used to help spot warm human bodies in a forested environment. But even the thermal imaging can't see through trees, making rescue missions a difficult task, even when a first responder is aided by thermal-equipped drones. With the drones that we fly, the thermal cameras that we have on them are not awesome. The resolution is really low. With an airborne thermal camera on a helicopter or an airplane, from about 5,000 feet, I can spot a perp. I'm using a high resolution liquid cooled thermal camera. The expectation that you're going to find somebody with the drone thermal cameras is pretty low. So it's nice to hear some honest talk about the success rate of the low resolution thermal cameras in the public safety field. In response to my list of 1,200 public safety pilots about their search and rescue success rates, the average of using a thermal camera in a forested environment was less than 4%, and for most people it was 0. Now, I wish I lived in an area where people get lost in open fields and there's no wildlife around, but that just doesn't happen, at least not in North Carolina or wherever I fly. But here's the exciting update. A group of researchers in Austria has developed an artificial intelligence solution called the Airborne Optical Sectioning, AOS for short. This is a software solution that allows multiple oblique angles of a thermal camera to be combined on the aircraft and then interpreted to show where the heat targets are. Now, I have samples of these images on the website psflight.org. If you go to the site, just search for AOS. Using artificial intelligence with AOS will not only allow us to essentially see through trees, but the artificial intelligence training can create data sets that can not only be used to identify specific targets, they can also be used to identify humans instead of every other horse, cow, turkey, deer, or whatever is out there in those woods. With the continued extended range and longer flight times of certified airworthy drones, we will be able to stay up for hours, cover much more ground, and separate heat targets from humans. I have a conversation with the AOS team next week, and I'm going to record it and share it on the website. That is my breaking news for you. Any questions?
Yeah, this is Wes with Flytrex. Can you talk a little bit about, I know we just talked about the white strobe. Can you talk about how operators under 107 have actually gone a lot further than 1,000 feet or 1,500 feet in compliance and also being audited by the FAA using multicolored strobes on their winglets? Are you familiar with any of those operations?
Yeah, I mean, the problem right now is that people are just taking off. And as long as they can continue to see the strobe, you know, a lot of this is going to be resolved with certified drones that will have extended ranges of operation. But right now, you just got to stay within visual line of sight for the average person that has a off-the-shelf drone.
Well, I've challenged FAA on this because we're familiar with a company that's flying about 2 miles using strobe and multicolored under 107, and they didn't really have an answer to us. They said they would basically look into it. But yeah, the certified aircraft right now does not take care of BV loss whatsoever. The FAA is probably 5 years away from anything that is remotely close to answering the 91-113 rule or the see and avoid rule. So on the type cert, they want nothing to do with see and avoid right now. It's all worrying about the ground risk, and that's it.
The other thing about the BV loss also is that now that remote ID is coming on board, none of the current drones that don't have an integrated remote ID solution will be able to fly BV loss no matter what.
Yeah, and they don't even have the requirements for manufacturing the remote ID defined yet. Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean,
It's
the field. The problem with the field is that so I've been a manned aircraft pilot since 1988. It was a whole different set of training, a whole different way that we came online. You know, you worked with instructors, and simulators were actually timing the aircraft and all that stuff. And when the drones came along, they kind of exploded before the regulations really were ready for them. And so now everything's just kind of taking a step back. So enforcements are increasing. Just this year, we've had at least 3 drone pilots criminally charged. And I expect the requirements for drone pilots to continue to get tighter and tighter.
So Steve, yeah. So Steve, regarding the discussion that you had, how many have you seen public safety agencies actually doing the 3-mile test for when they put strobes on the aircrafts and stuff?
My students do.
So that's the thing. How is that? So that's a good thing that you brought up as part of training. It's important, but when folks buy aircrafts or buy these strobes, because there is no set standards on that, how do we ensure that the folks who are flying at night are doing that test? Or what is the advice to folks who have not done it? I'm sure there is go now and do it, but you know, when it comes to buying strobes and putting on the aircraft and stuff, I've seen people connecting it, having it, but not really understanding the value of it.
Yeah, I mean, the strobes, of course, are the requirement for being able for manned aircraft to see the drone. Because the drones aren't certified, and because none of the aftermarket parts either have, in the manned world, we have STCs, PMAs, or TSOs for aftermarket parts that are certified that meet technical specifications. None of the strobes sold meet those requirements, So the only way the pilot can certify that the drone meets the 3 statute mile requirement is to self-certify it. So I always recommend everyone should have a logbook that kind of like we have for the airplane, where you're keeping track of every time you're doing a software update, every time you test fly it. So you would put a statement in there in that logbook, the date, the time, who participated, it met the requirement, your certificate number, sign it. That should be a logbook entry to certify that.
Super subjective though. Why doesn't ASTM identify how to certify it? I mean, because each individual certifier is going to obviously do this differently. You know, ASTM comes out with all sorts of standards. I'm curious as to why they haven't started that.
And Wes, that's a good point you brought up, but also the point I'm thinking is, are there any aircrafts right now in sales basically that have strobes inbuilt? Anyone aware about? No. So what my thought is, like, night waivers have been in discussion for about 2 to 3 years, and in that we already know about strobes. So what's stopping the OEMs to integrate it with the systems that they are releasing right now, or they're manufacturing, or they are selling? Why is that, you feel?
Well, any manufacturer can include strobes. More manufacturers are working to be compliant with that. Unless they're certified, type certified, airworthiness certified, or certified for safe operation by an FAA authorized representative, there is no technical meeting of that standard. So it falls back onto the pilot to self-certify. It's kind of like Dash, as man pilots, you know, if we want to stay night current, we have to do our 3 takeoff and landings to a full stop in 90 days. We have to self-certify that.
True. Makes sense. Yeah, but I'm just thinking, like, aircrafts don't come without strobes, and we don't buy strobes and attach.
There is some. The M200, right, has a bottom and top strobe. That the M200 dual aircraft has a strobe that you can attach to the top of it. Now, what I'm hearing is 1,000 feet. 1,000 feet is, if you look at, it's not just about the strobe. Steve's saying that you cannot take the drone in, I don't know, full moon conditions, Steve, half moon, 1,000 feet in the dark without the extensive lighting. Like maybe you're at a baseball stadium. Scott's got a baseball stadium behind him there. You know, you got a bunch of bright lights. So if you're in the dark in a rural area, you're not going to go 1,000 feet and be able to check boxes for altitude, attitude, orientation, and you can't use the remote control, or you can't use the GCS as your reference for these things. So
what's funny is that doesn't apply to 135 operations, because the pilot can be looking down at his GCS the whole time and just use a visual observer, and the only requirement is to actually not even see the drone. You just have to clear the airspace. Nobody needs to be watching the drone. That's literally what we've defined in 91 rules. So it's completely different.
Yeah, I agree. I bring up these things just simply because we shouldn't assume them, because none of these things matter at all until they matter. And, you know, there are only 2 kinds of pilots. There are those that have had an incident or an accident, and those that will. So that's why it's important to know this stuff. Now, knowing that the FAA considers that you must maintain visual line of sight at night and understand all of those things, if you look at an actual night waiver, item number 10 is the most interesting one. Operation must be illuminated, or you must have checked out your area of operation during the day. So, hey, you know what? I am a drone libertarian. I just give them the information, and people can do with it what they want. But that's what the rules are.
I would say that it's hard to say 1,000 feet when it's like, is this someone with 20/20 vision, 20/10 vision? Does that not come into play whatsoever?
Well, Oh no, you're right. You're right, Paul. There is no hard and fast 1,000 feet. As I said, it's going to be dependent on a number of situations. Speaking of vision, 20/20 during the day, at night turns into 20/40. Your vision, if you've had LASIK surgery, you're going to be have more night blindness than people who haven't. So that's why whatever the distance is that you can maintain that altitude, attitude, speed, direction of flight, or all that stuff, that's your distance.
Good information. And Ron just he mentioned that Mavic Enterprise has a strobe, and the hotel currently says to use Fox Fury. So that's the update.
Yeah.
And to go out, and the only way to know this is to, at some degree, go out into this safe area. You can't take a manufacturer's word for it. Under 107, you can't just listen to, how many people have just copy pasted a 107.29 waiver where it says, yeah, I'm going to attach this light and it's good for 3 miles, but they don't know. And at the top of that waiver, who's the responsible person? It's most likely them.
Right.
So
Paul, here's actually what it says in a 107.29 waiver. And you can go to the FAA site, you can pull them up. All of them say this. Item number 10, the area of operation must be sufficiently illuminated to allow both the remote pilot, the pilot in command, and the visual observer to identify people or obstacles on the ground, or a daytime site assessment must be performed prior to conducting operations. So the closer you can keep it, the better. But then again, certified aircraft are going to change all of this.
No, I think Steve brought up a good point today. And for folks who are on the call and also watching this, if you are planning to fly in the future in the nighttime, or feel you are currently proficient enough to fly in the night, then just revisit your first of all, read through your waiver properly, make sure you are following everything. Also, it's good to get a check done if you feel one of the biggest kill is the overconfidence that can stop your operation or even cause destruction. So recheck. If you have to go back for training, go back for training. Night flight is not similar to day flights. There's not multiple chances. It's if you make a mistake, it's done. So if you are doing night flights or planning to do in the future, go for the training and ask the instructor that who's you're training with, what exactly is the syllabus being taught. You're not going to be training in a perfect environment. You don't want everything to be set up for you prior to you coming in. You need to start from scratch and be able to set up everything as if you are actually going to be doing that flight. And I myself have gone through night flights wherein we pulled up to a construction site and we had to use the car lights to set up our stuff because it was pitch dark. And when I say pitch dark, means you cannot see anything. And the last thing you want is to flash lights onto each other's eyes and start setting up. So we have gone through situations where we had to cancel a flight only because we were not planned enough. We should have come early in the evening when there was still light, gone through the site. We didn't do any of those things. And so we canceled the flight. But that's the decision that everyone has to take. But
and Dash, in public safety, you pull up to an incident scene, and it's not just the headlights you got to worry about. I mean, everything is flashing. You have, your night blindness lasts forever. So one more thing, as Part 107 pilots, it's optional for us to have a visual observer. Again, as Dash just mentioned, if you have a 107.29 waiver, please go read it. And you also want to look at item number 8. Which is that all operations under your waiver require one or more visual observers. It's just good to remember.
I had a question for you, Steve.
Yeah.
What could you speak into what type of sensors, as well as what you have seen work in first responder or search and rescue situations, and just kind of what that looks like as a pilot walking into it?
So what's interesting is that I'm going to talk about just specifically fire service. the number of situations that are appropriate for the drone to fly is actually, it's very limited. You know, like in a residential structure fire, you don't need me in the air to tell you the house is on fire or that it's hot. And even in missing persons, what we're lacking right now is that solution, that artificial intelligence solution to identify heat signatures in the woods, because when we're flying using a thermal camera, you would not believe how much hot stuff is in the woods. So the payloads out there right now that are the most helpful are, there are some lights that are helpful. Here's the big problem is, so if you had something that's really helpful, like a bright spotlight or something that you could see in the dark, if you're conducting your flight in a compliant way, you could pretty much just walk over there with a flashlight and look at it too. So the payloads that are out there right now are limited. That's the bottom line. They're limited.
Okay, and this AOS system that you're talking about mostly is working with trying to get overlap from different angles in order to get more of a 3D image, right? It's almost like a 3D orthomosaic map.
Right. So again, if you visit the site, you'll see images of it. So what it's doing is you've got the tree that's here and you're flying over, you can't see under the tree, but you would have caught a little fraction of an image this way and this way and this way and this way. And artificial intelligence is coming. And the things that we are going to be able to do compliantly are going to be just amazing. You know, being able to take off from a station, fly to a GPS location while you've got public safety, fire and police en route, streaming live video. But we need better energy management, extended flight times, longer communications, ability to control the aircraft, ability to loiter over a scene, etc. And are
those mostly going to be attached to fixed wings? Are you seeing, or quadcopters?
No, they'll be not quadcopters, unless we've got some redundancy built in that they can stay up with.
Right. Well, like, or 8-armed or whatever.
Yeah. So I mean, it will be some type of what we say is a drone today. You know, it'll come back, it'll land at the top of the station, it'll recharge, refuel, whatever. And also, if you look at the airworthiness certification waivers that are out there, you'll see that the FAA is kind of pushing for aircraft that don't need really specialized people to fly them. One pilot can control up to 20 aircraft. And so what we're getting more into is not pilots that can push sticks, but in public safety, we need more pilots that can use better payloads to interpret the information, provide actionable information that makes a difference at an incident scene.
Got it. So it's mostly about the pilot learning how to interpret the information in real time and condense it into a report for someone else to make a decision.
Well, yeah, I mean, so if you got a missing person, and now we can fly beyond line of sight at night, stay up for extended periods of time, and I'm the pilot, I can take the drone off from station 1 and fly quickly out to the location. I can loiter there. I can use a solution like the AOS, some type of artificial intelligence to help me quickly locate the target. I can hover above the target and guide the first responders into the target, and I don't have to spend a whole bunch of time. I mean, as it is right now, if you had an extended search, you'd have to, you know, go out and get back in time to change your batteries with enough of a safety factor, and you just end up chewing time going out and back just to change batteries. So
right, absolutely.
Yeah,
I think another very, very important facet of this that drone pilots don't have is the ability to play a role in the kill chain or the survivor chain on the radio. So many drone pilots that I've come into contact with don't, you know, they push the think and they don't push the talk. So if you're going to be working in an operation that has a TFR and multiple aircraft on station, you need to be a valuable asset in that stack, or else they're going to shut down the operation because they don't know where you are. So if you can't give situational awareness and to all the other players on that radio net or in the air stack, then you probably shouldn't be there. So not only providing actionable. Yeah,
Wesley's absolutely right in that the role of the drone pilot is going to become more of a professional aviator. And I see that, like in the state of North Carolina, instead of all sorts of consumer electronics drones that are out there now, that we might have 6 or 8 regional teams that could respond to North Carolina emergency management, take off remotely, fly, the whole loiter extended time. But as Wes mentioned, the skills that he's talking about are the same sort of skills that we need in firefighting using aircraft. The whole knowing what the other aircraft are, communicating, etc. If we're going to stay over an incident for a longer period of time, we need to be able to talk on the radio and coordinate airspace with helicopters, other manned aircraft, CAP aircraft in an emergency, and we will just need more training. I'm sorry, Wes, if I stepped on you there.
Yeah, no. So I'm a former TACP, JTAC, and most of whenever there's a large scale event, they usually deploy a guard unit to control the stack and be air boss. And when I was living in North Dakota, I wrote a white paper with the current 24th SDS, the Specialist Tactics Squadron, down at Bragg, about commercial and public operations and integrating from the event being a local and then escalating up to a state, because at every echelon of command, as it passes, as it escalates, you're going to have different people in charge. And there really needs to be and North Carolina is a great place for it too, because there is events that are occurring in North Dakota. There's not very many events that occur, right? Maybe once every 5 years, there's a flood or something like that. But in North Carolina, it's a perfect place to institute this, where you take the experience and you go around to the public agencies and you teach them, air boss and airspace deconfliction and airspace integration. And then you also find your assets out there, your service providers that are your go-to, right? So you have some sort of standing roster that says, I know how to work with all of these entities, and I also know that they know how to work with us, so that you're not reinventing the wheel every time and trying to find a DSP to supplement the public and DoD operation. Because as a state, there are a lot of floods, there's a lot of hurricanes, there's a lot of events that occur that it could be justified to say, okay, how do we take what the military has been doing for years and years and years and blend it into a commercial or public operation, and kind of escalate it up. So I'd be more than happy to share that white paper that we wrote.
No, that'd be great. Thank you, Wesley.
I'll take it.
And that's a great point. Wesley, you bring a great point. I know we've got Wayne Bailey on here. We offer some communication classes as well, talking on the same exact point that you're making. Is we've got pilots that don't know how to communicate back and forth. They just don't. They've not been put in that role. They don't know air language to begin with, or basic call language. But you look at something like the wildfires in the mountains a couple of years ago, and I know Wayne can speak on this as well. You've got fixed wing, you've got helicopters, you've got unmanned groups in. You've got a recipe for disaster if you don't have communication, mixed with heavy smoke. So exactly right. That's a great point.
And if you want to know why companies like Uncw have had success in their operations out in the Northwest, I worked for Uncw for a little while as well. They hire a lot of former JTACs and a lot of former pilots from the military, because then they can walk the talk immediately. And that's another reason why they get a lot of those contracts, is because they can walk the talk. So, taking some of that and applying it to your business, it gives you the ability to, offer things that you maybe couldn't offer before, because you can walk the talk. So we can definitely talk offline.
As Wes mentioned, one of the great advantages of whether it's a JTAC or somebody else with military experience is that in public safety, it's almost impossible to take a police officer and have him turn off his police brain and turn on his aviator brain in a very intense situation. And so a lot of things just become non-compliant at that point. But somebody who's been trained to be both tactical and an aviator at the same time has a very different set of skills. So let me give you just one example of, and then I'll shut up. One example of where all of this integration needs to come into play. So I was flying as Fire Demon 1 in the airplane on the coast last year, and it was after a storm, and I'm doing storm assessment flying up the coast. At the same time, you've got a drone that I spot, a helicopter, you've got another plane coming the other way, and the only thing the drone can see is whatever they can see through their little straw, and they're just not aware of all this other stuff that's going on around them. And there's a lot out there that drone pilots will just have to wait till the technology comes and be able to handle at that point.
So as we're building our skills, what would you say would be the best direction to go in? A firefighter rescue training, a more tactical SOP route, or the aviator speak in aviator language?
Yes.
So,
right, all the above.
And I think you hit the big point. Training. The most important thing is
all of that stuff
training.
is true. Yeah, I mean, all of that stuff is true, and I'm definitely biased with all my experience in aviation. However, I do have to give a giant shout out to the aviation training that we got as fixed wing pilots, and how all the drone pilots, I feel like, got short circuited and became what I like to call accidental aviators. You know, we had all the things that were beaten into us, kind of like some of the things that Wes talked about, you know, aeronautical decision making, risk management, safety management systems, and there's no
CRM. Yeah, CRM is huge too.
CRM, and there's no shortage of the experience, the valuable experience you get from just having seen it. So the basic skills are just basic aviation skills. And once COVID's over, I will extend the same opportunity I've always had for people: is come fly with me in the airplane, and you know, I'll show you a whole different side of things.
I think it's just a matter of time, especially for the state of North Carolina, with folks like Narcisa and then you know, Elizabeth City State University, where they're offering programs where they are training these sort of pilots. You could always go to your local FBO and just get your private pilot certification. I'm a private pilot, instrument rated. I got it through Embry-Riddle, and it costs me how much more thousands of dollars to get it that way. But the level of education I received in CRM, safety, SMS, all those things, because I was being trained to be a professional drone operator. So, and I think comparatively operating an aircraft, right, a manned aircraft, versus some of these systems that are out there in these very restrictive settings, I think drones have a place, because a lot of people are out there doing great work alone, where they don't have to talk to anybody. You know, within that that line of sight bubble.
Here's a good example of where having an aviation background pays off. And look, I want to be absolutely clear. I am not saying that manned aviators are better than drone pilots at all. I'm just saying it's a different learning experience. So I had a drone pilot contact me this week, saying that he was doing a lot of flying at the approach end of grass strips and uncontrolled airports. And his way of dealing with planes that were coming in was getting on his handheld radio and yelling at them to pull up. So from a drone pilot point of view, there's nothing right about any of that. But from a drone pilot point of view, you just can't understand that that plane that's coming in is coming in at a speed that's not that much more than its stall speed. It's on a stabilized approach. And the last thing that pilot is going to do coming in at a half mile or a mile is suddenly pull up, because that plane will stall and auger into the ground and everyone will die. But it's just that kind of thing that pilot didn't have, the drone pilot didn't know about. So on that happy note.
Beyond that, I mean, man pilots always get.
Well, that's the point exactly. And I probably have 4 questions this year from guys that were in very similar situations that all ended with, I like to try to help people figure out how to accomplish the mission rather than just saying no. But these 4 guys all had the same situation. I got hired to do a gig. It's at the approach end of an airport. Traffic is coming in, and I know it's not safe to fly, but if I turn down the job, somebody else will do it. And they're right. So I don't know how we overcome that.
That's when I get a lot of email about just people always send me emails and say, you know, this is terrible, so and so took this job and they did it you know, illegally, and I always say this is going to be a temporary problem. Right. You know, this is a gray market right now where people are still able to sort of go out and do that kind of job illegally and maybe not end up in jail, but that just isn't going to be that's not going to happen for too much.
I'm also having to find that I have to end up educating a lot of clients on why something's inappropriate or why we may or may not be able to do something, and a change of time wouldn't help.
Right.
And they're not insurable if you're flying illegally. So they don't really, you know, they think they want you to do it, but they don't really want you to do it.
Well, this is a good example of how the field is growing up. So we have remote ID is coming, and it will go in drones. It will go to a point where every flight will be transmitting location data. This current first step is, you know, like remote ID light. But it's been really fun watching drone pilots all outraged and everything else about, oh my God, the government's going to track where I'm flying, all this other stuff. And you know what? In manned aviation, we have to transmit our data. It's available. You could go to flightaware.com or other sites. You can see where aircraft are at any particular moment. But here is the benefit. So the FAA is responsible for the national airspace. They're tracking where I'm going. There's a record of it, whatever. But as a manned aircraft pilot, having that information available to me on the screen, on an iPad, in the plane, knowing the direction, speed, altitude, everything else of traffic around me, significantly improves safety and situational awareness. It is a blessing, not a curse.
I think we all need to do a better job of communicating that this is actually for.
Well, you gotta have the systems that talk to each other. So in order to do that, the remote ID isn't going to talk to the ADSB in the aircraft. So
no,
so that's not entirely accurate because you're not going to get that data as a pilot right now. Yeah, so you're right. Until that happens, yeah. But yeah, it's a good direction.
But you know, if I had a crystal ball to look into, I would say that I don't even know how many years, but what will happen is that drone pilots will be required either by satellite, cellular, something to transmit it to a third-party provider that will feed it into the system, and that through what we receive through ADSB, that we will receive alerts when a drone is X number of feet or X number of miles that creates conflict. I don't want to see every drone that's below me. I only want to see drones that I need to worry about.
Yeah, because ATC has told me many times, I don't give a crap where you are. You know,
right.
Don't even talk to me. I don't want to know. So
I think so. One thing we have to understand, I think overall, is that technology is there. Technology is being built. Solutions are going to be coming. That's going to help, make flights safer, make us safer overall, but and make our operations speed up also. But the fact remains is that first, as a pilot, we have to be more. I would say we have to take more responsibility. First of all, if we are calling ourselves drone pilots, then a pilot is related to aviation company. If we don't call ourselves drone drivers, then we are ground-based, drivers. We are pilots, and when you call yourself a pilot, you need to take aviation overall seriously. And one of the biggest thing, as someone had mentioned earlier, is what do we do about Is it training? The biggest thing is training. There are still agencies, there are still folks who are good with technology and can fly a drone without any training, but that is not a part of your operations. That shouldn't be a part of your drone program. You have to get the right training. Do not fall for all that is shining out there. If there are packages, training packages offered where everything is perfect, then that's not where you're going to learn a lot. You learn through mistakes, you learn through failures. Most of us that got our training, even on the man side or unmanned side, we have made mistakes, and we have learned through those mistakes. Even during operations, we have learned the mistakes we can make, as most simple as, do we do a flight, a pre-flight check? How many of us take it for granted after a number of flights that, yeah, everything is good because yesterday night I closed the drone properly in the box and kept, so everything is good. But today things change. So that's something which has to change. First is the mindset. The pilots should have. So that's where it comes back to, if you call yourself a pilot, take aviation seriously, realize that you're not the only person using the airspace, and a lot of things are coming up. As mentioned, remote ID, FAA is working on making the regulations easier for you in a way, because they trust that you're taking the responsibility. They're not going to take your responsibility. So that's something that we have understood, and we should continue understanding and put the message out. We're coming close to the end, but some things we just wanted to highlight. First of all, Steve, thank you. Narcissa, thank you. You all have wealth of knowledge, and I know this is not just the one last session you're going to keep inviting you, but we really thank you for taking the time out. Few things that we wanted to inform everyone about is, I'll just pass it to Paul, and if you all are looking for jobs, Paul has some information for you. Paul.
Yeah, thank you everyone for staying through and participating in this great conversation this afternoon. Talking to you now as the site operations manager with Causey Aviation, based here in North Carolina. We are growing our operations, and we are looking for more remote pilots. So we currently have a position open. I've posted the link in the chat where that job posting and description is. We are looking for pilots in the Hoke County to operate in both the Hoke County and Cumberland County areas. Have to have a current Part 107 remote pilot certification. Looking for folks that do have that crew resource type mentality, have done some operations in a crew. But if you do want to know more, the link here is in the chat, or you can reach out directly to me. A lot more details are in there as far as what's required of the position, different things like that. So again, looking
also,
for
more than one.
Go ahead,
too,
Wes.
right, Paul? Also more than
yes,
one.
looking for more than one. So we're looking for at least 3, potentially more, but we definitely need to get some applicants in. So anyone that that's interested within the state or out of the state, this opportunity, Causey Aviation, we are doing big things, and we are looking to build to do even more things and grow in the drone delivery space within North Carolina. So the things that we're doing, working along with Wes and Flytrex, big things. So if you know any pilots, or if you are a pilot on this call that is interested in becoming a part of an awesome organization, definitely go to that link, reach out, can answer any questions. So thanks.
Yeah.
Thanks, Darshan.
Darshan, can I
yeah, that's what I was going to point it to you. Yeah, even Wes, I think
so
Flytrex has some position.
Well, so I first will talk about the Causey Aviation opportunities. So, there's these Part 135 operations that are occurring all over the country. And one of the things that we've done with Causey is we're bridging the gap between 107 and a 135 or a commercial pilot. So Instead of you needing a Part 61 to operate a 135 operation, Kazi has applied for an exemption because they built a 135 pseudo training program for drones. So very soon there's going to be Part 107 pilots that have been certified under a approved Part 135 program. And if you come on to Kazi now, you'll have that opportunity to train underneath the Part 135 program and then be able to put on your resume like, hey, I've trained underneath an approved Part 135. I'm a certified Part 135 drone operator, and that will be able to be transferred to other 135 operations. So that's a really important topic. Is we're kind of bridging the gap. We're taking a 107 very, very light training and putting 1,000 pages of training. It's no joke. That's how big this training program is. It's about 1,000 pages. So you're gonna obviously we're producing much more talent than just a 107 pilot. So big things. Also, just tagging up, we just posted as well. We're hiring probably 3 or 4 remote pilots in Greensboro. We're certifying our FTX, so it's a Flytrex drone, and we need test pilots, R&D pilots, and then potentially commercial drone delivery pilots as well. So Paul's recruiting in Hope County and Cumberland County, and we're recruiting up in Guilford County. We'll be doing operations and testing in all sorts of environments, including Iceland, North Dakota for cold weather testing, and also in Israel for low elevation coastal operations. So, and we also just shared our production manager. So we're looking for somebody that has at least 2 years of experience certifying aircraft, so manned background, and people that are familiar with Part 21, Subpart G, because we are certifying our aircraft. Even though the FAA hasn't determined who it is that's going to sign it off, we still need people that understand conformity, production certificates, and how to certify aircraft. So we're hiring a pretty high-level position to manage our production facility with me and our legal team in Israel. So we posted it. We have some resumes, but we'd love to get way more. So if you guys know of anything, then please spread the word. I've shared both of them on LinkedIn. I think Kazi has as well, and then there's Indeed post for Flytrex.
Yeah, and Wes, I've shared it on the link too. So the folks on the call and to folks who are hearing this session, 2020 was not a great year. A lot of people were looking for these drone deliveries, the future, where a lot of companies is hiring, and Flytrex has been perfecting everything for the last couple of years. So they really know what they're doing, and it's a great opportunity to be a part of the company at the ground level itself as they're growing. So reach out to Wesley, reach out to Paul. They're on LinkedIn. Thank you guys. And another topic just to mention is the AUVS and North Carolina committee is growing, and we are always looking for people to join. We'll be soon adding another person to the team who comes with regulatory background, as and when he gives us the thumbs up and says yes, he will be part of all our sessions and everything. And we'll be focusing on some new topics that we generally did not last year, that is getting into depth into UTM, urban air mobility discussions and everything. So a lot of stuff happening here. We started a podcast that is hosted by Zia, which is focused on counter-UAS and automation and emerging technologies. So follow that. All our information is on our social media. Do take the time to look through it. All the job postings that you see or hear about, we try and post it on our social media. And then lastly, if you're interested in being a part of the committee, reach out to me, Riley, Paul, and if you have any questions about things happening in the industry, send it to us. We will cover it as a topic. Hopefully, we will be getting in the next month or two Kazi and Flytrex in one of these sessions to go in depth a little bit more about drone delivery and the future and what opportunities lie. So maybe Wes or Paul can give some free jobs out, lucky draw out. I don't know.
Well, by then there's definitely we're gonna have like you mentioned next month to have a more in-depth, detailed view into exactly what Causey is doing. As Wes might have mentioned, Causey Aviation's been around since the 70s, flying manned aircraft, organs, medical flights, and things like that. So 135 is what we do, and it's what the organization knows. So it's exciting time.
Perfect. And so with that, we will wrap up for today.
Darshan?
Yeah. Yes.
Before you go, I wanted to introduce Scott to you guys. Scott's been
Sure. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Scott Harrigan, who owns a Harrigan Aerial up in our way here on Long Island, is a real superior mapping technologist with drones. He really knows his business. Riley, I would love to introduce him exactly the way you introduced Steve. So I'm going to put all that in the box and give it to you guys. That's the same kind of wrap I'm going to give Scott without wasting anybody's time.
I like that.
But yeah, so I'm going to take Riley's words. I want to plug them in here. Paul, I mentioned Scott. Riley, I mentioned Scott, and Darshan. So just a quick introduction, Scott, and thank you for jumping on board. Quite a engineer, because that's really his trade.
I'll take that. Yeah, I'll take that any day. No, much appreciated. There's some great stuff there. Especially enjoyed. So my background is mostly environmental. We do photogrammetry, thermal, and LiDAR. And so first presentation there was very enlightening, very interesting. Doing a lot of stuff for water quality monitoring and thermal up here in Long Island. So happy to be a part of it. Really cool to see this stuff. I'm a long-time listener, first-time caller. Followed AUVSI and the whole group and watched a lot of these for quite some time. So really interested to help where I can and participate.
We're glad to have you, Scott. Thank you so much for joining us today, and we look forward to you being here in the future and doing some stuff with you.
Paul, I'll talk to you about our boys up in New England another time.
All right.
Darshan, I'm going to bring you in that conversation at one point.
Absolutely.
All right, guys, I'm good. Thank you.
All righty. So, yep, we will catch up. So we'll be having a session next month. We'll be posting it soon. It's going to be hosted by Paul, and it's going to be focusing on drones in construction. So that'll be our March webinar. Our webinars are going to be slightly different from now on. We're not going to have a bunch of people on it. We're just going to have one, max and two, but we're going to deep dive into specific topics and really find the questions that need answers to, and really get you the best I think information out, rather than stuff at high level. So our webinars are going to be slightly changing their format. We'll keep you all posted on that. But there will be a lot of other stuff happening. Meantime, if you need some session that we need to focus on, reach out to us. If you have any questions regarding regulatory side or anything like that, reach out to us. Anything you need, just reach us through an email. That's ncauvsi@gmail.com, or through the social media, and we will try and point you to the right people. But yeah, good luck if you are applying for the jobs as the job market is opening up. And if there's anything we can help out, always reach out to us. And with that, have a good weekend and stay safe, everyone.